Greetings students, this is Professor Chronicler here with a first in a series of deck profiles that we will have on this channel. So today our first deck profile that we'll be looking at is a deck that I recently took to a tournament and ended up winning. This deck being the Aurora Battle Princess deck. So I'm going to break down this deck for you and tell you how I built my deck. But before I begin, I want to explain what I did with this deck. So, I ended up taking this deck to a tournament last weekend, and surprisingly, I ended up going 4-0 in a 4-round tournament. Yeah, I surprised myself. So, I'm going to break down the deck for you, starting with the ride line all the way down to the grade 0 to the triggers. So for my ride line, this is my pretty much most standard people's ride lines. So I'm playing Ruby Red as my grade 1, Kynet Blue as my grade 1, Seraph Pink as my grade 2, and then my main boss unit for this deck is Aurora Battle Princess, Seraph Snow. Now I actually have these three right here are triple R versions from the Festival Collection 2021. But this one is the triple R foiling from the start deck, actually. So, yeah. So that's pretty much going to be it. I'm just going to give you a closer look. So, this girl right here is actually capable of imprisoning 2 of your rear guards every turn. But the funny thing is, this can also work as both a vanguard and a rear guard. There was one situation I had 2 of these on the field, and I was able to imprison 4 rear guards at a time. Moving on to the second card, Seraph Pink. This card allows you to rip a card from your opponent's hand early on. So, if you're going second, if you went first, then you can do this. So, basically it works well. And here we have the Searcher for the Prison, which is Kynet Blue. Now, this is a good card that you want to search it, but it's essential. And then Ruby Red is just your generic starter. So that's pretty much my ride line right here. So I'm going to break my deck down, starting with the grade 3s. For my main deck, I play 3 copies of Seraph Snow, because one's in the right deck, which brings the total of 4. And I do play a tech card in this lineup. This being Grand Road Fi Guider. Now, I'm only using this as a tech option, but this is also a good card for imprisoning your opponent's rear guards when you need to. Say you need to get rid of a pesky rear guard or something. Moving up to the grade 2s, where things get a little complicated. For my grade 2 lineup, I play 4 copies of Perio Turquoise. Now, this is a great card, can also be a good attacker, but the main application for this card is that, say your opponent gets a card out of their prison, well, this girl can actually minus you 5,000 power per copy of this card. So if you have 2, that card loses 10,000 power. I actually fought an overdress deck with this deck, and pulled out a trick. The guy called a Trickstar from the prison. This card's effect went off, went to 0 instantly. So it's a good attacker. And then I play 4 copies of Agra Rouge. Now this is a good 10k, another 15k attacker, but this can also be a 15k shield or interceptor. And this card is also good for like imprisoning your opponent's rear guards too. Now, just so you know, some of these cards come with the Soul Blast cost. Turquoise doesn't. My next grade 2, I only play 2 copies of Dairy Violet. This can be a pseudo perfect guard, but this can only work against grade 2 attacking units. Like for example, if your opponent has a grade 2 overdress card, you can basically just slap this on the Guardian Circle and say, oh, you got it, well, it's a grade 2, I'll just nullify it with Dairy Violet. It's a good card. I only played 2 copies though, but she's pretty helpful. And next, and finally, we have one of 2 order cards I'm playing in this deck. This being Moment of Capture, Aurora Battle Princess, 24-hour coverage. Now, this is another card that can actually take a card from your opponent's hand, but the only downside is that your opponent must have 4 or more cards. However, the good news is that this can actually work on decks that draw a lot and get a lot of card values, such as, for example, Bastion or Orphist. So this card is very good. You do want to play 4 copies in this deck, but I was only able to get 3. The final spot was actually for the grade 3 I mentioned earlier. And it also gives one of your rear guards 5,000 power, so it can be pretty good to work with. Next, moving on to the grade 1 lineup. I want to start off with 1 copy of the set order we have, the Galacticus Prison card. This is the triple R version that I actually got pulled from 4 boxes of the Festival Collection. So I'm going to put a link. If you're interested, you'll want to see that video. But I played 1 copy because, honestly, you actually need this. And this card is searchable on the first turn, but you have to rest something. But if you're going first, you can actually rest your own Vanguard to use it. And this is pretty much your centerpiece for your whole deck. Next up for my grade 1 lineups, I play 4 copies of Bizarre Beast Bagu Motor. Now, this is a great card to work with because this imprisons cards from your opponent's drop zone. Now, we did get a similar card, what was it, Spark Limone, I believe? Yeah, I think that's right. But that attack was only an on-hit skill. This is an at skill that you can use again and again. I did have a game. There was one game actually that basically I had 2 of them on the field, so I was able to imprison 2 cards from their opponent's drop zone per turn. That's pretty good. Also, I do want to mention when you play this card, when you first activate, you soul charge 3 immediately, so that can help with the soul. Next up, we play 4 copies of Hyperspeed Robo Shovelstead. Now, this is another good imprison target, but can also act as your draw engine. Which allows you, if you get like have 3 or more cards in your prison, you can draw a card. So this is very helpful, but it does cost a counterblast and a soul blast, so you might want to be careful with that. And then, last but not least, I play the obvious 4 Violate Dragon, the PG. Yeah, so PGs like these are actually going to be essential in every Brandgate deck. We also have the Orphis deck, and also the upcoming Gravita Nordlinger deck for set 3, which is coming in December. So, all in all, I'm pretty happy with how this works. Thanks. And then, lastly, for my triggers, I play the obvious 1 over trigger. However, with the fronts and crits, you can mix and match them. In my case, I have 4 front triggers. Oops, that was there. 7 crits and 4 heal triggers. So it's pretty much your standard build. You can run draw triggers if you want. However, there are cards that draw you cards, like Shovelstead, and also Seraph Snow herself can also give you triple drive, which means you basically get 3 cards per drive check. Okay. And also with Seraph Snow, she can also give you like power and a drive check if you have cards in your prison, so she's pretty good to work with, and it's very easy. So overall, I'm very happy with my with how this deck turned out. But what I'm really surprised about is that how I managed to go 4 or 0 in a tournament. So I'm going to explain how that happened. So most of the time, my 2 of my rounds I ended up winning just 2 games, but my other 2 matches I ended up going 3 matches. So the first deck that I ended up playing against was a overdress deck, and because overdress relies on a lot of rear guards, I was able to imprison those cards easily. My second opponent was a Orphist deck, which was interesting because both decks are actually from the same nation. So that ended up going about 3 games, but the match did give my opponent a learning curve because he never fought a prison deck before. And then for my game 3, I ended up playing a Draconic Overlord deck, and during the second match, I made my opponent deck out. He had like 1 card left in deck, and I had 3 cards in mind. I would have attacked my Vanguard, and I would have lost. But I didn't do it, so he ended up drawing the last card, and I ended up winning that match. So I won by deck out. And then my final match was against an Alchemagic deck. And that was in one of those games, I actually had 2 Seraph Snows on my field. One in my Vanguard circle, one in my Rearguard circle. And that basically allowed me to imprison 4 Rearguards at a time. Alright, I know it sounds a little crazy, but that's true. So that's pretty much how I ended up going 4-0 in a tournament with a prison deck. I'm very happy with how the deck runs and how it plays, and I hope to definitely win a few more tournaments with this. So all in all, if you're really interested in building a prison, the cards aren't that hard to find. You just got to find the right places to buy singles, or you can get them online. Alright, or you can get them via trades. So, I hope you enjoyed this first deck profile. And join me again soon where we'll have another deck profile. Until then, this has been Professor Gear Chronicler, and class is dismissed.